back to the Afrotropics. So I'm going to really talk to Nigeria as one of the largest in Africa, population-wise, and try to see what we are grappling with. So, we are an amazing group of people growing, and it's interesting to note that population growth annually in Nigeria currently is 2.7. That's the Anglophone country in Africa. And when we look at the Francophone, that's Democratic Republic of Congo, is the fastest growing in the Francophone country. And it's interesting that it's growing at a percentage of 3.2%. So, and many of us are conversant with the forecast that the world population will hit a staggering 9.8 billion by 2050, and that this figure, the global south is really going to contribute. Africa is contributing a lot to that 9.8 billion. So what are the causes? What do we really know going by the top of our head? High population rates in the Afrotropics. So in Europe, for instance, fertility rate is really going down, but it's increasing in Africa. So this very common scenario where you have a young girl married at the age of 12 and start becoming mothers at the age of 15. So it's not a very good picture. You can see at the one right at this end, both babies, I should call them, because a 12-year-old is a baby, and the children are not really doing so good. And then I'm happy that Jane spoke about the girl child and the need to educate the girl child. So we have such problem with that part of education, educating the girl child, and really this is really contributory to why we're having such high fertility rates. And then the large family also is an issue. So should we be worried? Of course, that's why we are here. About the ecosystem and how population growth is really affecting the ecosystem. So back to this map, as you can see, the pink dots, or the red dots, whatever your color tells you, we have a lot of large circles of it, and it's mostly within the global south, and that's where you have more of the endemic species and the critically endangered species, according to the IUCN data. So these are the issues we are grappling with. Now, Population Action International says human population size, growth, and migration are underlying causes, and that with increasing demand for food and services to service this growing population. But I would like to lean towards Population Matters that says that it is a product of both consumption and numbers. So to tackle biodiversity loss, we must address both the numbers and unsustainable consumption of goods and services. And that also is in line with what he talked about, means of production. So forgive me, I'm a biologist, so I'm really going to tell a lot of my talk towards some of the work we've been doing and how we're looking at the trends in biodiversity, how we're losing biodiversity or degrading biodiversity, and how increase in population is contributing to this. And so I'm really going to talk about unsustainable hunting of bushmeat and the impacts on biodiversity. And then I will just mention oil and gas, mineral exploration, the unsustainable way this is happening and how it's affecting biodiversity, and also forest conversion. So, I'm going to talk about the large primates. So what do we know about them? They are charismatic species. They're wonderful. They are umbrella species, which means that the well-being of many other species and even humans depend on them to some very large extent. And they are good seed dispersers. They are landscapers. But the interesting thing is that they have very low fertility rates, so they get to sexual maturity about 12 years, and they have like one child in a year, except for this case in Pandrilus in Calabar Cross River that had the twin. That was the first birth of a drill monkey ever recorded in the world. So we have very interesting paper. Now, Nonice and her colleagues in Latin America were able to discover with many other studies that, hey, we're not just losing the large primate, but it's affecting the regeneration of the forest. So we have a forest that we still have the tall trees, but it's so different in the understory, where you have fewer and fewer species of the fruit-bearing trees as seedlings, and this is very worrisome. So what are the consequences on the animal population, on the forest ecosystem, and on humans? So bushmeat is actually utilizing wild meat for protein, and it's been there many years. Our forefathers were living on this. And so back in the days when population was quite at a good level, with bow and arrow, you can catch a rodent, porcupine, and the family will have a very tasty meal. But as population continues to grow, and then there's consumption also increase, and also the desire for more profits, now we start having more modernized and more improved ways of harvesting animals. And then what happened is that this has a lot of consequences. There's high extinction rate, and then there's a shift on the forest floor, that's the turnover, and we end up having fewer. The projection is that we have fewer fruit-bearing trees in the future because of what we're having currently right now on the forest floor. And this affects the livelihood of humans, especially forest-dependent communities, that a lot of their livelihood depends on this forest. And so, for instance, we call them the big three, the Cross River gorilla, the Nigerian Cameroon chimpanzee, and the drill. So they have such a small space of forest between southeastern Nigeria and southwestern Cameroon. And for the Cross River gorilla that is critically endangered, we have just about 300 of them left in the wild. So we find out that the population of this very important group of vertebrates is shrinking. And also it's affecting the elephant. I'm happy he mentioned the elephant, and Winnie is going to talk more about it. So these are very good gardeners of the forest. And when we take up more space, when there's pressure on land, so we shrink the home range of some of these big vertebrates that need a wide home range to live. And they have very important ecosystem services that they render. For instance, seed dispersal, like I talked about earlier. So when we had more of from that sketch, when we have more of the frugivores taking the fruits, we have the good escape for fruits that fall on the ground for the seedling to grow and germinate without being taken over. But when we introduce more of hunting, we take out the frugivores, we have a lot of seeds on the forest floor. And what we are now experiencing from both studies in South America and in the Afrotropics is that the forest is largely taken over by rodents. We have less and less of the bigger frugivores, which is what I'm trying to illustrate with that sketch. So, from this data, it's so clear that you may have a forest that have similar mature trees, but on the forest floor, standing mature trees, but on the forest floor, you have very little, in some almost non-existence of seedlings of primate dispersed species. And these are really species that will give birth to fruits, trees. What I mean is that fruits are in different types. There are the dry ones that nobody is really interested in, none of the animals are really interested in, but the big, delicious, mango-like fruits, those ones are the ones that are really losing because their seeds are big and they need bigger frugivores to carry their seeds and take them away from the parent trees so they can have the chance to regenerate, to grow. And also, we carried out this analysis, and it was very interesting to know that when we classified the trees into those dispersed by primate, those dispersed by wind, we found out that many of the trees that gives fruits and nuts, a lot of ecosystem services, are really the ones that have, many of them have just the primate as their effective seed dispersers. So when we lose the primate, we are also going to lose these fruit trees that are highly, highly important to the livelihood of humans. Thank you. And so time will fail me to talk about unsustainable oil and mineral exploration in the global south. This has been an issue for a very long time. We have a large expanse of forest land like that is almost converted to areas that cannot even be used, even by the fishes, by humans. I mean, this is a common scenario in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, where farmlands and even large tracts of forest is being bursted into fire because of unsustainable exploration of minerals and oil. A lot of fishes are dying, a lot of people are losing their homes and their farmlands, and so these ways of consumption, rates of consumption, is highly impacting the livelihood of people, and not just people, because when we talk about biodiversity, we're talking about the species, we talk about genes, we talk about the ecosystem, we talk about processes, ecological processes, and we're losing it because of not just population growth, but I think population growth gives birth to, high population growth gives birth to unsustainable production. And then we talk about forest conversion. This is very common in the South, where a lot of expanse of land is being converted into plantation. I mean, I had a discussion with one of us today and said, how are you raising the fieldwood plantation? Because we see that unsustainable harvest of fieldwood is one of the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation. I said, what we do is that we are not bringing down the forest to establish a woodlot, but what we do, we go into the degraded forest and we try to regenerate and to enrich it with fieldwood, adding this fast-growing species so that we can have less pressure on the pristine forest. So I would like to coast us home with this warning from IPBX studies, which I have been privileged to be a lead author for the African region, and that there's an urgent warning that unless urgent and concerted action is taken, land degradation, as biodiversity loss, will worsen because in the face of population growth and unprecedented consumption. And so how do we curb unsustainable consumption? How do we put an end to pollution? For starters, we have to talk about the hunger issue, this big issue, as he was talking about, and then we can have the climate-smart agriculture. It's a better option. And then multinationals have to play by the rule, and countries in the South has to demand more transparency, more accountability from their leadership. And we cannot say enough to raising advocacy and awareness, which is why we are here today. So the big question still remains, how do we bring down fertility rates? How do we end gory pictures like this? Policy reform. We have to educate the girl child. Just like Jane Goodall said and Philip said, when we educate the girl child, we give the girl child more power to make decisions and more power to be able to decide, oh, I'm going for the right number for my family. Let's collaborate, let's educate them. That's why we're here. And so we salute the work of Population Matters And we salute the work of UNESCO and Always and many other groups that are working very hard to see to it that the girl child is properly educated, is given opportunity. And so the take-home message, which is my last slide, achieving sustainable human population and consumption is urgent. When we do that, it will improve human well-being, will protect the biodiversity, maintain a healthier world, and everybody goes home happy. Thank you very much.